Hey, you guys, this is Tired Goth, and you are watching the Psychic Decryption show. This is a new series. It's Threat Intel 103, and this has to do with advanced decryption of messages using divination tools. And this particular chart that I've developed is actually a graph that shows, well, it's a chart, kind of, but it shows a pattern that I developed specifically for reading lenormand cards in what is called a grand tableau, or a large table spread. So, for those of you who read lenormand cards, it is something that you can use to decrypt information across a wide expanse of time. You can decrypt months worth of data in a single table spread, up to 3 months, or it can actually transpose as information that carries over the course of years. The way that I've set this particular reading up shows you the directions that things can be read in. So a regular grand tableau here would go, 8 across, about 4 rows in. So it would go from left to right. You would put the first card on the top row from the left and continue right until you counted 8 cards, and then set up another 4 rows beneath those with the same count of cards. And this area here, I know the writing is a bit small, but this area here is actually what's called the fate set of the deck. You can read the fate cards in succession against these cards over here. This is actually where fate touches down with events in a single row. This is a trend, tangential, but also a traditional way to read this. However, here, if you can see, I've also set up multi-directional arrows here, showing that you can read them in certain directions to qualify certain information. This directional crux offers sort of a timeline that instead of tracing from point A across in a plane spread where you have the left to the right reading, so on and so forth for the 4 rows, you also have the fate cards read not only on cross diagonals upward toward the left, as if they're taking like, a directional movement from the bottom right to the top left in succession for all 4 of the fate cards, but you can also read them going down from the last card. Thank you for joining my fan club. From the last card all the way through down to the bottom where the fate cards are. So you would actually take the 8th card in a regular spread and count on a diagonal downward to where the fate card touches. Now, this is really important because what this actually provides you is a timeline of external events. Not many people realize that in a grand tableau reading, it's mostly the events of the person in their life as they are experiencing it. But other external factors, similarly to how I guess you could say the Celtic cross in tarot is read, where you have a 1 card facing upward and then you have one that crosses against it, sort of as a further explanation for the circumstance at hand. You actually have an ability to do this in a very detailed way with lenormand, in such a way where you can actually quantify the types of events that are happening surrounding an event, the timing, and possibly even who's involved, depending on the signifiers based on their personalities reflected through the cards. So if you have, for example, a situation where one of your fate cards is a star and another one of your fate cards is a rat, there could be a lot of anxiety surrounding your success and your fame in life, right? And the cards that are matched in this diagonal position can explain what's causing the anxiety, whether it's other people in your life, whether it's certain events that you feel in your gut that you're fated to experience, and other things that have something to do with this. This is something that is actually crucial to understanding the lenormand, the way that it was used by tacticians like Marie Lenormand, who developed the reading types that were done here. So Marie Lenormand, for those of you who aren't aware, was someone who read for Napoleon Bonaparte. People who were in military factions used cartomancers to decide what it is that they should do to plot their steps and when they should act on certain things. So Napoleon Bonaparte was famous for hiring Marie Lenormand to give her grace as a card reader, and not just a card reader, but a tactician. So she was able to strategize a lot of his accounts that he was able to brag about in history, and that he went down for in history as an excellent fighter, as a leader, and as a strategist. But believe it or not, the one bit of advice that he didn't take from her is actually what led to that disaster out in the Himalayas with Hannibal. So he was advised in this one circumstance with Marie Lenormand not to take the elephants and his entire army up the side of a mountain to go fight the people on the other side. And he said, no, we have to go. He was very bullheaded about it. He decided he wasn't going to take advice from the one person who had secured every single one of his victories thus far. He didn't trust her with that. He said, no, I feel like I should go. And it was the one battle that cost him everything. And it was predicted to be a failure by Marie Lenormand. She advised against it. So Lenormand, as a tarot tool, as a card tool, is actually a highly effective strategy tool. It's good for planning dates. It's good for calculating strategies. And it's even better for assuring that if you are to make a move, you are consulting your guides spiritually first with details in the depictions to decide what it is that could be a more viable and less dangerous strategy. Similarly enough, in Western astrology, Eastern astrology, there were superstitious predictions based on Qigong and I Ching and all sorts of other measurements of energetic fields and favorable positioning and non-favorable positioning for certain events that played into a similar type of, I guess you could say, predictive reasoning. So before we had AI and before we had these other resolving tactics, we actually had cards to tell us vague but sometimes very specific type of vagaries that could more or less point directions and paths out that would be beneficial for an overall outcome. Now, outcomes were not always directly predicted. They were advised against, however, in the case that they would become dangerous or maliciously inclined to the health and the safety of the person petitioning the advice. So this is something that became pertinent to a lot of people over the course of time, not only as a tool, but as something to hide from people. It was crucial for this to remain hidden because in the hands of a person who is attempting to have fair combat, it would yield an advantage to them that otherwise would have been problematic to the side doing something to win at all costs. So this particular alignment that I developed actually decodes a lot of the methodologies that were likely used specifically to trace certain events. Now, I'm saying, this is my work because I remember the day in 2018 when I sat down on my living room floor and actually mapped it out and decoded the entire thing and cracked it, So that's me and my work. However, this is also something that was not widely disclosed to anyone. I didn't have sources for this. I actually just read the cards one day and I was like, wait a second, there's another story. There's a whole story here. And this is where it progressed into, oh my God, you can read the cards backwards, basically, to depict exactly what impacts the fate cards, what decides what could be dangerous or beneficial to the fate success, and what it is to look out for in the way of support and also hindrances in certain areas of one's journey. Now, keep in mind, while we all aren't planning to to hike a mountain with a bunch of elephants on any given day, I guess. We are kind of trying to calculate and surmise certain events that could be really important to us in our lives. So this is something that is actually beneficial as a tool for this. And beyond beneficial, it's something that in the hands of a lot of people, you want to assure that this is not something that's being abused. The reason being that abusing this type of information is actually considered to be very spiritually violent. And it is something that only a qualified person should really be able to do. And I'm not saying a license will do this. I'm saying someone who has spiritual reverence and can prove themselves to have boundaries and respect for the craft of reading anything in the way of information. For example, the perfect example of this is if you work in an office, it's a need-to-know basis kind of environment, right? A lot of situations involving other people's data is need to know. It is precisely the same kind of situation for cartomancy. And I understand that a lot of people will purchase a license, however, it doesn't qualify them to read. I can assure you of this. There are plenty of people who will manage to secure enough money to purchase a license, but will not be spiritually qualified to possess the credentials to handle other people's information without guile. Now, what does it mean to handle something without guile? It means to be innocent in your approach with this information, with your distribution of this information straight back to the party, and not to withhold information to distribute to secondary and tertiary parties. Meaning that confidentiality is exceptionally held to. And also permissions must be granted in order for anyone to obtain information without violation spiritually. Because I don't know if you know this, if you do not have spiritual clearance in the way of a spiritual rank that you have obtained through practice, through solitary meditation, through comprehension of the human condition and its limitations, and all sorts of other things that seem really complicated in its language, but really it's just respect how you would a person's body, the way that you read the cards. It's not something you jump into. It's not something you treat crassly in any way, shape, or form. You actually take it into consideration that this is almost like handling a person's entire body with your hands. And it is a very delicate procedure when it comes to relaying the information that is pertinent to their health, their happiness, and their success back to them in a way that guides them and does not coerce them. Handling this data is not meant to be manipulated in any way, shape, or form. It is simply a dictation, really, as if you're reading something out of a dictionary, with inferences of one's own keys, I guess you could say, answer keys and whatnot, to assure that the person who's receiving this information is actually getting the right translation. It's basically like, if you're a good enough reader, you act almost like a Rosetta Stone or a decryption key or a hash key or something for the reading so that the person gets their individualized reading and that they feel secure with the information that they've received, whether or not it's good news. It's meant to be delivered in a very, very delicate, sincere, and heartfelt kind of way. It's not meant to be thrown around as information that hasn't been handled with accuracy, right? So in order to achieve accuracy, but with respect to the human condition of emotional well-being, you also want to, I feel like someone's trying to block my throat chakra. You also want to take into consideration and the fact that whatever it is you deliver is also your responsibility to handle with care. It is very much a delivery. So it matters how you present the information to a person who is seeking this information in earnest, with honesty. So this is, I just wanted to point this out to you. The methodology that I used starts at the bottom, heads over this way from the top, and then heads the opposite way coming in from the corner on the top right side down here to the fate cards to get clarity on more enemy interferences. You can read on your enemies, you can read on interfering parties. You can read about events that could seem to be major situations but actually come to a close. And in the case that you are operating with a reader who has not had accuracy, it's because they haven't become literate enough in the cards, for example, with respect to experiences that they have experienced in their own journeys, and also experiences that have to do with their contextual application. In all honesty, to become a truly good reader, it is a very personal experience. One and another reader may get the same exact messages and downloads. However, their basis for their interpretations came from very personal experiences. People who were meant to do this, people who are designated to do this, I'll say, were given the answers through very personal and sometimes sacrificial experiences. It's not something they can read in a book in order to have depth of insight. You can have the translation, you can have the keywords, but in order to achieve the depth of a true high priestess, that's decided by God, actually. It's decided by the powers that be in this universe that elect a person ready to deliver this information upon receiving it. Now, how do they receive it? Honestly, I don't really know. Some people receive it in dreams. Some people receive it as psychic visions, downloads. It's been called many things. And there are a lot of naysayers in this field, in this scope of observation also, who like to call it a mental illness to be able to see into a person's soul. Makes sense, doesn't it? Perhaps they have something to hide. As we've recently discovered, about a lot of people who are in power, what they decided to do with it, the lengths that they went to cover it. To decide for other people what they were allowed to see with their own eyes in all contexts and chakra inclusions of the word. So intuition factors into a lot of this. And one's intuition is developed very well based on the experiences that they were allowed to touch, but were not necessarily allowed to touch them, if that makes any sense, in the explanation of the phrase. Because it's to have viable experience in this field, it is a bit like traversing the water but not swimming in it, not drowning in it. It's almost as if you're treading on ice. You have the basis for these things. You have the idea, the concept of what could be happening, but in order for your intuition to kick in, you had to have at least touched base with some of those experiences yourself to have understood it for the clarity. Whether you heard it in passing, you exchanged keys with another adept, high priest or priestess, whether you exchanged, your own life experiences. A lot of people like to joke about this and call it like septum ring theory, right? Where people share their stories and stuff, but is it not making sense that people who can see through situations based on the breadth of their experience, like breadth, breadth, the expanse of their experiences, is what is allowing them to become psychic? So of course, people who can do that, people who can develop those skills through the constant situations they've experienced, are going to be taken for granted by people who see them as powerful and are afraid of them. Because what happens when you experience a disaster is you become wise. Now, what happens when you have a bunch of people who are becoming wise at the same time? Well, maybe the cool kids, who are considered to be the wisest of everyone at the table, suddenly don't seem so edgy, cool, relevant, or applicable anymore. So of course it's going to become a competition. Who has the better story? Who has the better judgment? Who has the better encapsulation of a history? Who has the better observational skills? what it comes down to is the fact that we're here to help one another, and it's kind of just like keep your eyes on your own page if you don't know how to share nice. I don't want to say it that way, but it's like if you can't play along because you're scared of losing your position, which is natural, maybe realize that reading cards isn't king of the hill. It doesn't work that way. We don't do that. Real readers don't do that. Real readers will talk to each other and be like, you taught me something. And they'll be like, yeah, and you taught me something. And it's just like, it's actually like a whole friendship picnic. It's really cool. And, you know, I guess it's just like the mentality about it. It's the experience. It's what it's meant to be versus what people try to turn it into for capital, really. Because, like, yes, value currency, value positioning, value experience. But it's kind of just like, if you're just there to compete for money, like it's a whole gaming thing, like you're kind of missing the whole point. We're here to build people into people. We're here to build people into like fully self-aware people who are protected by their intuition. We're basically like giving people advice that maybe their own parents didn't know how to give them, because a parent is probably grief-stricken and frightened for the safety of their child to the point that their own intuition stops working, if not strictly to protect the child in an aggravated sort of state that they then need to seek therapy for. So it's kind of just like, we can pick up the cards for you and give you some peace of mind if you need that, and maybe even help you tune into what's really getting your intuition in a, you know, like a rumpled state. It's just a concept, but, you know, in application, I'll say it works. Thank you. This is actually just to answer some questions here, because I'm noticing the audience, and I'm very grateful for all of your participation and for your compliments. Thank you. This is more of a lecture series that I'm doing. You can check me out on youtube.com/@tired G0THOX, where I have a bunch of free educational material. I have a Threat Intel series 101 and 102. And I also have a Threat Intel 103 series, which I'm encapsulating here for you to decrypt psychic tools and to help other people learn how this works. Now, this is a minor tutelage here. I teach these classes. I do larger events and classes, and you can book me for them personally. I do sessions online. I also do group sessions. You can book me all together for the same times and schedules, and I can accommodate you there. And I would be happy to see you and work with you, because this is something that I feel could really expand the consciousness, and it's a lot of fun. And it's good for people who don't read as well, because if you go to a reader and you want to make sure that you're picking out someone who really knows what they're doing, this is a way that you can ground yourself and find a basis for your questions. It can structure your arguments. It can structure your intuitive reasoning. And it can also help you pick out a reader who's not going to, have a problem like one of our participants here, Leish did, or Leish. I forgive me if I don't know how to pronounce your name. But yeah, inaccuracy is a huge problem. It makes a person feel scammed. And it's not fun. It's really not fun. I actually learned how to read to avoid getting scammed intuitively. I just felt like it was the right thing to do. So I started at 18. As for the yes or no questions, I would like to do them for you, but perhaps in another reading session. So I will be back to do that. And I'm very grateful for your compliments. I'm grateful for your presences here. And in the case that you would like to follow me, subscribe. And I'm sorry to hear that you spent money on something that felt unfulfilling for your petition. Well, I have a lot of ways that can help you hone your intuition when using discernment with people as well. I teach a class called Negative Trust. It's cybersecurity geared, but it's something that can be applied to just about any type of intuitive logic. It's a formula that I developed that helps people understand their conceptualization of data that is not complete. And I happen to be really good at teaching that class. I'm probably the only person who could teach it to you just the way you need it to be taught. So feel free to reach out to tell me what it is you need. Feel free to chat me up in my DMs, ask questions. to tell me what it is you need. Feel free to chat me up in my DMs, ask a question.